Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Good to be here.
Today we are doing something a little different. Usually we take a source, we extract the key insights, and we help you become a little bit smarter at dinner parties.
Right.
But today we are handing you a tactical weapon. If you have been walking around with this gnawing sense that the world has gone slightly mad, that logic has just been suspended in your workplace or your university, and that you are somehow viewed as the enemy just for existing as a man, you are going to want to listen to every single second of this.
Yeah, it is rare we get a source text that strips away the varnish, quite like this one. It's aggressive, it's unapologetic, and honestly, it connects dots that most sociological texts are absolutely terrified to even look at.
Exactly. It's not just a critique.
No, it's a battle plan.
But before we open fire on this topic, I have a very specific job for you listening. Right now, pause for 1 second and hit that like and subscribe button.
Seriously, do it now.
Yeah, the algorithms are not fond of this kind of content. They actually hate it. And we need your signal to keep this channel alive.
Engagement is really the only way to break through the noise of the censorship regime we're dealing with.
100%. Now, housekeeping done. The source material for today's deep dive is the book Anti-Western Cult of Women by Conrad Riker. And let's be clear up front, Riker isn't here to make friends.
Definitely not.
He calls this book a manual for reclaiming dignity in a civilization that he argues has essentially declared war on masculinity.
And look, if what we discussed today resonates with you, and if you're paying attention to the cultural zeitgeist at all, I suspect it might, you need to get the full arsenal.
Yeah.
Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks immediately and buy the ebook. What we are doing here today is just the reconnaissance, but the book itself is the ammunition.
Right. You need the actual text. Now, I also need to make a really important disclaimer before we dive into the weeds here.
Oh, absolutely.
For you listening, this deep dive covers some highly politically charged content. It touches on intense left-wing and right-wing cultural frameworks.
And we are not taking sides here.
Not at all. We are not endorsing the viewpoints of the author or any of the ideologies mentioned. We are simply imparting the ideas contained in the original source material. We're just the messengers, breaking down what Riker actually wrote.
Just analyzing the architecture of the argument.
Exactly. So, let's set the stage. Riker starts by addressing that feeling I mentioned in the opener, that disorienting sense of displacement.
Yeah, the feeling of walking into institutions that used to stand for logic.
Right. Universities, HR departments, the courts, they used to be about merit and justice, but now it feels like you've stepped into a machine that was specifically designed to crush you.
And Riker argues that this is not some random cultural drift.
It's not just times changing.
Right. He describes it as a highly targeted dismantling of Western civilization by what he calls a feminist Marxist alliance. He's saying the very brick and mortar of our society is being repurposed to just grind the masculine spirit into dust.
It's a heavy accusation. He literally calls it a siege.
A silent war.
Yeah. And to understand this siege, our mission today is to unpack the core concept of the book first, which is gynocentrism. Now, we hear this term thrown around sometimes, but Riker gives it a really specific definition. What does he actually mean by it in the text?
This is really the core diagnosis of the whole book. Riker argues that Western civilization was historically built on an achievement-based hierarchy.
Okay, so merit.
Exactly. You build the bridge stays up, you get the credit, it's about physics, objective reality, competence. Gynocentrism flips this into what he calls an oppression-based hierarchy.
Meaning what, exactly, for the average guy?
Meaning that your value isn't determined by what you build or what you solve anymore. It's determined by your identity and your level of claimed victimhood.
Wow.
Yeah, Riker points out that society has elevated female emotional safety to be the supreme good. Truth is no longer the highest virtue. Validating feelings is.
So if a fact hurts a feeling,
the fact has to be discarded immediately.
That is wild. But he doesn't just leave it as this, philosophical complaint. He actually brings a lot of data. He calls it the silent war. Let's look at the numbers he provides, because they are pretty stark.
They are grim. He starts with the family courts, which is where he says most men first encounter the sharp end of this spear. Fathers lose custody in approximately 80% of cases.
80%.
Yeah. And Riker argues that is not a statistical margin of error. That is a systemic preference. It's built right into the code of the legal system.
And the consequences of that displacement are fatal, according to the book.
Right. He cites the suicide rates. Men are killing themselves at nearly 4 times the rate of women. But the part that really highlights the actual structure of this system, the mechanics of it, is the wealth transfer.
The welfare state argument.
Yes. Riker notes that women receive about 75% of means-tested welfare benefits, but men pay the vast majority of the taxes.
So he essentially views it as a massive wealth extraction machine.
That's exactly how he frames it. He describes it as a mechanism where men provide the resources, but the state, acting as this sort of proxy husband, distributes those resources to women.
It disconnects the provider from the authority.
Precisely. You have all the responsibility of paying to keep civilization running, but none of the authority to direct it.
Man, Riker uses this analogy of the Red Queen hypothesis from evolutionary biology to explain the male experience in this economy, and I thought this was just brilliant. Can you break that down for the listener?
Oh, it fits perfectly. So in evolutionary biology, the Red Queen hypothesis is about having to run as fast as you can just to stay in the exact same place.
Because the environment is adapting against you.
Right. And Riker applies this to the modern man. You work harder, you produce more, you try to play by the rules, but the female-crafted legal system constantly raises the requirements.
The goalposts are always moving.
Constantly. The definition of support expands. The definition of abuse expands to include things like financial withholding or emotional neglect.
Or even just silence, right?
Exactly. You are running on a treadmill that powers a machine that, according to Riker, actively hates you.
He calls men beasts of burden in a cage made of words. That is such a haunting image.
It really is.
But the question you have to ask is, how did we get here? Because Riker goes deep into the history. He makes it clear this isn't just modern wokeness or Twitter trends. This goes way back to the 19th century.
Yeah, this is chapter 4 of the book, and it is totally essential for understanding the lineage of these ideas. He traces it all the way back to Friedrich Engels in 1884.
The Marxist theorist?
Right. Engels explicitly wrote that the traditional family was the original system of enslavement. The Marxists basically decided that the bond between man, woman, and child was actually a form of transactional theft.
But here's the historical twist that I think a lot of people miss. Riker points out that economic Marxism failed in the West. The workers didn't revolt like they were supposed to.
They didn't. As Riker puts it, the proletariat was too busy buying cars and houses.
Right.
The economic apocalypse didn't happen because capitalism actually worked for the working man. They got a good deal. So the left needed a new battering ram.
They couldn't use class warfare anymore.
No, because the class lines were blurring. People were moving up. So they pivoted to gender.
And that's the Marxist feminist alliance he's talking about.
Precisely. They swapped class warfare for gender warfare. They realized that to fundamentally destroy the West, they had to sever the patriarch's ability to transmit values to the next generation.
If you destroy the father, you break the chain of history.
Exactly. Riker actually calls modern feminism rebranded Bolshevism.
That is a bold claim.
It is, but he backs it up. He argues its goal isn't equality. If it were equality, we'd be talking about equal representation in bricklaying, sewage treatment, or coal mining.
The dirty jobs.
Right. But its goal is to strip men of authority and leave behind atomized consumers that the state can easily control.
Yeah.
It's about power, pure and simple.
It's a compelling, if terrifying, theory. But Riker doesn't just stay in the history department, he goes into biology. And this is where the text gets really controversial and frankly, absolutely fascinating. He talks about the empathizing systemizing theory. Now, for you listening who hasn't taken a Psychology 101 class recently, what is this?
So this is largely based on the work of researchers like Simon Baron-Cohen, though Riker applies it politically in Chapter 3. The theory suggests a fundamental neurological difference in population distribution.
Between men and women.
Yes, male brains lean, on average, towards systemizing. So that's logic, rules, facts, figuring out how things work mechanically. Female brains lean toward empathizing, emotion, consensus, social harmony.
And he actually maps this directly onto the political spectrum.
He does. He argues that the political left is female-coded. It prioritizes safety, feeling, and resource distribution. It's the mothering instinct scaled up to a government level.
And
The right is male-coded, prioritizing liberty, structure, and merit. So the cultural clash we are seeing right now isn't just political for Riker. He argues it's biological. It's a fundamental conflict between two completely different ways of processing reality.
which perfectly sets up one of the most powerful and honestly disturbing archetypes in the book, the terrible mother.
Yes, this is a Jungian concept that Riker applies to the modern state. In Jungian psychology, you have the Blessed Mother who raises her children to be independent, to leave the nest and face the dangers of the world.
Right, to grow up.
But the terrible mother devours her children. She wants eternal dependency.
She creates what he calls a kingdom of infants.
Yes, Riker argues the modern welfare state is the terrible mother. She actively punishes the productive men who she views as predators in her worldview to feed the collective infants.
Because productive, independent men don't need her.
Exactly. She creates a population that is terrified of the real world and just perpetually clinging to her skirts. It completely replaces the father principle, which is law, order, and judgment, with the mother principle of undifferentiated nurturing.
And Riker says you see the propaganda for this everywhere, specifically in the media. He has a whole section called Manufacturing Mussenry.
Oh, the commercials. This part is so validating to read. Riker cites a study analyzing television commercials from 2000 to 2020. Men were portrayed as incompetent 87% of the time in domestic settings.
87%. Compared to what for women?
Only 11% for women.
It's the bumbling husband trope.
Exactly. The guy who can't even figure out how to operate a dishwasher, and he has to be saved by his eye-rolling, all-knowing wife. Riker argues this is a literal psyop. It's designed to constantly condition men to accept a lower social status.
And then you have what he calls Amazonian revisionism in Hollywood.
Right, like the movies The Woman King or Wonder Woman. Rewriting history to center women as the ultimate warriors and the leaders, completely ignoring historical reality.
Riker calls it a fantasy of a return to the womb, right?
Yes, it's a rejection of the masculine drive to actually conquer nature and build things, replaced by this cinematic fantasy where women do it all without ever needing men.
And God forbid you point any of this out in the real world. Look at what happened to James Damore at Google. Riker holds him up as a modern martyr in the book.
The martyrdom of logic, he calls it. For anyone who forgot, Damore was the Google engineer who wrote an internal memo that was logically consistent, citing evolutionary psychology to explain the gender gap in tech.
He didn't even say women were bad at tech.
No, he just said they were statistically different in their interests. And for that, he was publicly crucified and fired.
It completely proved Riker's point, didn't it?
It proved that you absolutely cannot use logic in a system that is built on the terrible mother archetype. Logic is viewed as a physical attack. It's heresy. You are bringing facts to a feelings fight, and the system will destroy you for it.
It's a female inquisition, and the legal system is the ultimate enforcer of it. We touched on custody earlier, but Riker talks about no-fault divorce as the ultimate trap.
Yeah, he describes it as a system that financially incentivizes the breaking of a contract. Think about it. If you can unilaterally break a contract and get a massive cash prize alimony, the house, the kids, why wouldn't you do it?
It turns marriage into a financial ambush for men.
Exactly. Riker's advice here is blunt. He says you must understand the contract before you sign it because the state is a third party in your marriage and the state is not on your side.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the disease, we know the history, we know the psychological archetypes, but how do they keep men in line on a daily basis? How do they stop guys from just revolting against this raw deal? Riker introduces this triad concept, GSR, gossip, shame, rally.
This is their primary social enforcement tool. Riker argues that women, evolutionarily speaking, use language and social standing as their primary weapon.
Right, instead of physical force.
Yes. So gossip identifies the violator, the guy who isn't conforming to the gynocentric rules. Shame lowers his social status. And rally isolates him from the rest of the tribe.
He calls it mate suppression.
Correct. By collectively devaluing men's status, women artificially increase their own bargaining power. And they have completely weaponized language to do it. Think of the buzzwords we hear every single day. Toxic masculinity, mansplaining.
I actually loved Riker's take on mansplaining in the book. It was a massive paradigm shift.
It's great. He says mansplaining is actually just confidence. It's a man asserting facts. It is the structural engineering of civilization.
Right.
When a man explains how the physics of a bridge works, that isn't oppression, that's physics.
And toxic masculinity.
He argues that toxic masculinity is almost always just the protective aggression that built the very walls keeping these critics safe. They demonize the exact traits that keep civilization alive.
Okay, so we have the diagnosis. It's incredibly bleak. But Riker doesn't just want the reader to be angry. He wants us to be sovereign. This is the tactical part of the deep dive we promised you. What is the masculine mandate?
This covers chapters 14 through 16, and it's highly actionable. The first step is intellectual sovereignty. You have to absolutely stop using their language. Stop apologizing.
Never apologize to the mob.
Never. Because when you apologize to a mob, Riker says it's like bleeding in a shark tank. It doesn't elicit mercy. It just triggers a feeding frenzy.
He talks about the gray rock method here. I found this incredibly practical for the workplace or just hostile social situations in general. Explain how that works for the listener.
It's a brilliant defensive tactic for dealing with the GSR triad, specifically the shaming part. When a woman, or a male feminist for that matter, tries to shame you or bait you into an emotional argument, you become as uninteresting as a gray rock. You completely deny them the emotional reaction.
Because that reaction is what they actually want.
Right. Exactly. They are looking for a dopamine hit from your distress. They want you to get angry or defensive or start justifying yourself. If you give them absolutely nothing, monosyllabic answers, no eye contact, total utter boredom, they starve. It breaks the cycle of abuse.
Then once you've starved them, what's next?
Then you use mockery, point and laugh. The one thing a totalitarian system cannot stand is being laughed at.
That's so true.
Riker says men need to be the jesters of truth. If someone calls you toxic, do not defend yourself. Laugh at the absurdity of the term. Treat it with the exact level of contempt it deserves.
I love that. But the mandate isn't just about defense, is it? It's about building. He tells this amazing story about a gender studies major who became a welder. This really resonated with me regarding his whole concept of returning to reality.
That's his principle of the return to competence. So this guy in the book was deeply depressed, totally lost in the abstraction of modern academia where everything is subjective and based on feelings.
Right, word games.
Word games. So he quits. He becomes a welder. And the day he lays his first perfect bead of steel, his depression just vanishes.
Why?
Because reality doesn't care about your feelings. The pipe either holds the pressure or it blows up. It's objective truth.
Nobody cares about your lived experience. They care if the pipe holds pressure. That is the quote of the deep dive for me.
It is the ultimate antidote to the cult. Riker's final advice is to build a fortress. Build your body until it's a weapon. Build your mind using the trivium logic, grammar, rhetoric. Build your bank account so you are financially untouchable.
You cannot negotiate with a terrible mother.
No, you just have to build walls high enough to keep her out.
It's really about reclaiming the role of the architect.
Yes, the future belongs to those who accept responsibility, not those who claim victimhood. Riker sums up the whole book with this irrefutable syllogism. The female-coded left rejects objective truth in favor of feeling. Therefore, it is mathematically unsustainable. It will eventually collapse. It's simple physics.
It's entropy.
Exactly. The Renaissance comes when men simply step back and let the rot burn away. We have to stand firm on the bedrock of logic. Let them have their feelings. We will keep the civilization.
That is a wildly powerful place to land. This book, Anti-Western Cult of Women, is definitely not for the faint of heart. But man, it is a wake-up call.
It is. And honestly, we have only scratched the surface of the data and the historical arguments Riker presents. We didn't even have time to touch on his chapters regarding education reform or the granular specifics of legal asset protection for men.
There's so much more in the text.
If you want the full picture, if you want the actual tools to defend yourself intellectually and legally, you need to read this book cover to cover.
Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now. Buy Anti-Western Cult of Women. Do not wait on this. This is the exact manual you have been looking for.
And make sure you are actively following the author. He is at Conrad Dreiker on Substack for his regular in-depth analysis, and you should follow him on Twitter and YouTube as well. The man is leading the charge on this front, and you definitely want to be tuning in to that frequency.
Absolutely. And before you click away, make sure you have liked this video and subscribed to the channel. We are going to keep bringing you the deep dives that the mainstream algorithm desperately wants to bury.
The truth is not a democracy of feelings. Stay sovereign.
But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own. What if the very collapse of these institutions that Riker is warning us about isn't a tragedy at all? What if it's a necessary forest fire? What if your job isn't to try and save a system that hates you, but simply to let it burn so you can own the ashes? See you on the next deep dive.